Hello, my friends. Good afternoon. It's Friday afternoon, and I wanted to read. Be right back. I'm back again. I'm Pastor Lou, here at the High Mountain Presbyterian Church, the building located in Franklin Lakes, the ministry extending out to where you are today. This is the Pastor's Chat. It's an opportunity to, on a weekday basis, for those of you who are here regularly, we check in together. And we ask the question, how are you doing? So I was reading and I came across this poem, and I thought, my goodness, it describes exactly what is going on today outside in the weather. It's a poem by Robert Frost. The sun was warm, but the wind was chill. You know how it is with an April day. When the sun is out and the wind is still, you're but 1 month on in the middle of May. But if you so much as dare to speak, a cloud comes over the sunlit arch, a wind comes off of a frozen peak, and you are 2 months back in the middle of March. It's Robert Frost. The wind is howling around me today, and it feels like it has just come off of a frozen peak. And yet, when the wind stops, the sun is bright and warm and promising of spring, which is to come. This is the season of Easter. This is that time of year where I saw some friends who don't live too far from me posted a picture of it snowing, and yet I remember just a couple of days ago, it was so warm outside, it was amazing. It's all mixed in here together in this season of Easter. So Easter is 7 weeks. It's a week of Sundays. It is not one Sunday. In the calendar of the church for centuries, Easter was a season. And it's a season that brings with it the sort of hallmark of a certain way of being, a certain way of thinking. And we've talked about it as being people of the East, that in particular, in this week of Sundays and the days in between, which, by the way, total 50. Lent is 40 days, and not including the Sundays. Easter, the season of Easter, is 50 days long. And it ends with Pentecost. And if you know anything about the way language is, that's what Pentecost is. Pentecost is 50 days after Easter. And Christians have borrowed some of these festivals from our heritage in the Jewish faith. There were 50 days that followed the Passover, and in those 50 days following the Passover, they too had a season of the Passover. It wasn't just one weekend or one night, a season of Passover, and it ended with a feast, the Feast of Pentecost. And so 50 days after Easter, Christians celebrate Pentecost too, and the arrival of a third stage kind of our discipleship, of what it means to be a Christian in the world. How do we practice Christianity? I mean, partly the answer to practicing Christianity is by exercising grace and mercy and compassion to our fellow human beings. That's how Christianity is practiced. Jesus says, love one another. But the discipline of Christianity, the bits and pieces of how we continue to mark ourselves off as Christians, becomes our discipline. I remember years ago in one of those gatherings of Christians, well-intentioned, I'm sure, trying to stir a greater fervor, a greater commitment of Christians, the evangelist preacher said he wanted to pose a question to those of us who were young adults. and to say, you call yourself a Christian? And of course, we didn't really know what to say. We were at a Christian camp, and everybody was like, well, I sure don't want to say I'm not a Christian, because then everybody will focus on trying to get me to change to be a Christian. So we pretty much said, well, yeah, we think of ourselves as Christians. And he asked this question. I know it's been asked in several different places, but he said, well, if you were dragged into court and you were accused of being a Christian, would there be any evidence to convict you? Would there be any evidence in your life? Would your life stand out if all of a sudden being a Christian was illegal? Could you be convicted of the crime? Now, I didn't really care that much for the whole event and the whole sort of, ethos of that, but I have remembered that and thought, that's good. Another one that people use all the time is they say, you don't become a Christian just by sitting in church any more than you can become a car by sitting in a garage. You don't become a car just because you hang out in a garage. And you don't become a Christian, you aren't a Christian just because you sit in church. So Easter is a season where we declare that we are going to follow Jesus. That was, remember in Lent, the 40 days of Lent was an opportunity for people who had fallen away from a life of faith to come back, to recommit. It was also a way of deepening our commitments by doing self-examination and honesty and confession, time spent on our knees, maybe fasting, maybe doing something to intensify our commitment to saying, I am a follower of Christ in this world. I didn't just sign a fire insurance document. I want to live as a Christian. I want to walk as a Christian in this life, and then trying to true up is the season of Lent. Easter comes, and the explosion of life, which is Easter, of God's grace, forgiveness, acceptance, and those that have fallen away are welcomed back in, and life is all made new. It's made new. There's newness to life, and it comes from God the same way as life comes back in nature in spring. Now, I was reading a little bit this week about what used to be more of the practice of the season of Easter. We really have lost the season of Easter almost entirely. Lent, it's still pretty strong, the Roman Catholic Church especially, but even in the Roman Catholic Church, the season of Easter is not so well marked out. And when I was reading in a Presbyterian guide on Easter, what I learned was that although during Lent there was an invitation a lot in the history of the church to spend time literally on our knees, to pray from the position of humility and of subservience, and to be on our knees praying. But during the season of Easter, there was to be no kneeling during prayer. Because the season of Easter was a celebration of God has lifted us up. God has accepted us. We stand before God renewed in the newness of what God is doing. And that we are able to exercise the muscles of grace and faith and life, and that we do not need, in the season of Easter, we are embracing a different truth. Not a truth about us, a truth about God and God's ability to renew everything. No kneeling. 50 days of no kneeling. And the other thing was 50 days of no fasting. It was inappropriate to be fasting in the season of banquet, in the season of celebration, in the season of victory of life over death, and in a way, kind of victory of life over grief. It's a time of letting go. It's not to deny grief, goodness sakes, no. But carrying it with us, it's a little bit like the poem by Robert Frost, which is, we got one foot into spring, but we're not immune to the cold winds off the top of the glacial mountains. Not at all. They come, they strike us. But in the blink of an eye, the cloud will move off and the sun will shine, and we can feel the life-giving energy of the sun again, and know that actually we're moving forward. We are moving forward. We're moving forward into life and to hope and to better things, better ways of being, working on, digging out in our time of Lent, confessions about racial prejudices and hatreds that we know we have. We know when we're honest, we know they're there. Often they're hidden. But Easter is a time to stand up and move into new ways of relating. Move into the power of Easter. Life. Some of you have noticed that I had a cherry blossom here next to me for a while, and it was a snipped cherry blossom, so it was getting tired. So I brought my prayer plant. And the prayer plant, I don't know exactly why it's called a prayer plant. It looks a bit more like a jack in the pulpit. Anyway, it's a symbol of life. We have several of these flowering plants that are here gracing the environment of the sanctuary now. Because life is among us. Easter has come. And for these 50 days, we look to the east, we watch for the rising, we bear up under the long, dark nights of the soul that we must still go through. The weeping comes in the night, but joy comes in the morning. And in the season of Easter, we don't ignore the weeping. We don't go into people of denial, no. But with strength, we can endure and we can persevere because joy comes in the morning. It's probably not necessarily legitimate for me to be borrowing on birth metaphors, but I attended a Lamaze class for the birth of my children. And one of the things, a very wise sort of midwife kind of person who was teaching the class was teaching pain management. And she was trying to give the mother who was going to bear a child in the class to say, when the pain of a contraction is at its worst, then the thing you want to try to do mentally is you want to remember a couple of things. It's not going to last probably for more than a minute, and maybe a minute and a half. And it will pass. And then she would talk about focusing on, allowing yourself to focus on the time when the contractions were done and a child would be born. And the joy that you would have holding on through the night with an anticipation of the joy that was to come. Now, having said that, I've been a pastor for a while, and I know there are a lot of people who have endured the pangs of childbirth, and then they don't have a child. Child was born stillborn. I'm not saying that every dark, long, dark night of the soul has an immediate solution to it. Many times things go from bad to worse. They do. But the principle still remains that in the worst of the struggling, in the season of Easter, we lift our eyes to the horizon. We hold on knowing there will be a day will come when this too shall pass. And this becomes part of our, as in Lent, there was a discipline of self-reflection and of confession and willingness to own our imperfections and to really look at them and to ask others for help with them. And now in the season of Easter, maybe we also need help to be together, to then march boldly with our eyes toward the horizon and say, I know today is the way today is, but it's not going to be this way forever. This is the season of Easter. It's 50 days. 50 days of trying purposefully to hold on to the promise of tomorrow, the promise of finding joy in this day. And the season helps us. When you live where we live, in North America, the season of Easter really gives you wind in your sails on this effort to see life in spite of whatever else is happening around you. I'm sure you've had those days in the spring, where something really, really doesn't go the way you want it to go. You wish it would. You wish whatever happened wouldn't have happened. You get a diagnosis. You get something that just really just rocks your world. But then you walk outside and, the warmth of the sun, and you sit on a bench. The power of life is teeming around us. So I'm glad they put Easter in the springtime. It helps to teach the lesson without words. No kneeling during prayers, no fasting. This is a season of rejoicing, of celebrating life and celebrating, in particular, God's true and honest love of us. That's it, my friends, today. I hope you're having a good spring day and looking forward to what's to come. Blessings to you, and I pray strength for you enough to be a blessing wherever you are. No matter where you go, what you do, where you don't go, what you're not able to do, my prayer is for you right there where you are, that you will know God's blessing in your life today and every day. I'll see you here on the Pastor's Chat on Monday, and we'll have a chance to ask each other again, how are you doing in this season of Easter? God bless you, my friends. Stay safe.